Well, welcome back to the Better Everyday Podcast, where we're unlocking our best self one episode at a time. My name is Grace Garcia, and this is my wonderful husband, David Garcia.
Hello.
Today, I'm going to bring this up not because I'm self-centered. I brought it up in past shows, but my birthday's next month.
Oh my goodness.
You didn't know where I was going with that?
Yeah, no.
My birthday's next month, and I'm bringing it up because I am so excited. That's one reason.
What are you excited for?
For turning 30, which I feel like is a huge deal. I'm excited for our trip, which we've been planning for a while. But the second reason that I wanted to bring up of why I'm excited is I think I'm just getting more confidence with age. Mm-hmm. It could be age, it could be maturity, it could just be me being intentional about it for the past couple of years. But it is true what they say, like 20s, even though my 20s weren't bad, like people make it seem like 20s are, oh my gosh, like trial and error, like through the fire. And then they say 30s is where you start fully becoming who you are and confident, and then, it gets better from there. Mm-hmm. But I definitely feel like I am in the season of Godfidence. Like my confidence is in him, and he's given me that confidence and self-love.
Yeah.
But I wanted to talk about a topic that I feel like I've personally struggled with, and kind of want to know if you struggled with it. And I think it's a term that's relatively new, at least in mainstream media. I really haven't heard it until like the last few years. And that's imposter syndrome. And just, you gave me a simple definition of imposter syndrome, just so that we're all on the same page when we say this phrase. And it says it's the internal struggle that people experience when they feel like they don't deserve their success, despite having the qualifications or evidence to prove otherwise. Mm-hmm. I personally have felt that in moments in my life where I'm like, who do I think I am? Or why am I in this place or in this job, in this position, whatever it is. And then again, now I feel like it's nearing the end of that, as I'm going to step into my 30s. But I think a lot of people experience it from all fields, whether you're a student, whether you're a CEO, high achieving individuals, low achieving individuals. And so I think this is a topic that can help out a lot of people. Mm-hmm. So I'd want to ask you, have you ever felt imposter syndrome before? Do you think it's real? What do you think?
I think the feelings are real, and I think that's what imposter syndrome is. So imposter syndrome, for those that don't know, it's not an actual mental issue. It's not, if there was like a page or like a poster for mental health, imposter syndrome usually is not on there. It's just a feeling. It's a feeling of not being adequate for the position that you have. It's the feeling of, which I get a lot, is they're going to find out I'm not as good as they think. And so they're going to fire me. They're going to let me go. They're going to feel like they don't need me anymore because I'm not as good as they thought. I'm not going to live up to the expectation. Mm.
So you're saying you have felt that.
Oh yeah. Yeah. A lot. And doing a little bit of research on this topic, I came across something that's pretty interesting, and it's one perspective that says you don't have imposter syndrome when you're a student, because when you're a student, you're openly saying, I don't know, and I'm here to learn. Mm. You become you get into the realm of imposter syndrome when you go from being the student to being the teacher. And that's only because, okay, now you're about to impart this knowledge. You're about to basically perform everything that you've been studying for a group of people. And that's when the imposter syndrome comes in, because the perspective basically says you're stepping into something that you haven't stepped into before. And it's almost logical to have imposter syndrome because you have nothing to prove that you belong there. And so that perspective says, or that perspective or theory basically says, you step into it and then you build the identity of that's who you are. Then you get the evidence of that is who you are. Like, for example, myself, one of the many times that I've gotten imposter syndrome is everyone who knows me knows that I love numbers. I love numbers. I love things that have to do with investing, personal investing, 401k, Roth. I love, I'm a financial coach, so I love, being able to help people with debt. I'm passionate about it. All the people that know me know that I try to do all the research as possible. I try to stay up to date. Usually when somebody brings up a topic that has to do with finances, I can handle myself. I can, I can do it. So I'm clearly very passionate about it. I am confident. If somebody strikes up a conversation with me, I'm ready to go. But the moment that I became an actual financial coach and said to the world, hey, I'm here to help you, was when the imposter syndrome came in. So for me, that perspective that I'm telling you about is true. As a student, as somebody saying, oh, I'm doing all the research. I'm not saying I'm perfect at this. And I'm not saying like I have this way to make you a millionaire, but that I know my stuff. I know my stuff. And I can have a conversation about it. But now putting your financial journey into my hands to be able to help you.
Yeah.
I go from being a student to a teacher, and now the imposter syndrome comes in and goes, who says that you're as good as you think you are? What makes you think that you can actually help these people? What makes you think that you know how to teach these people? And yeah, I get imposter syndrome, and that's one of the reasons why my wife tends to go, David, go do this, go advertise about your financial, whatchamacallit, go advertise about your photography, go advertise about this and that. And I go, no.
There's so many you guys know me. I try to monetize off everything. I'm like a hustler. If I see an opportunity, I take the opportunity. And yeah, I'm like, David, it just makes sense in my head. So you're saying it's the imposter syndrome that stops you?
Yeah. So imposter syndrome can also be defined as fear. The fear of, I'm going to be given this family, I'm going to be given whatever, and they're going to give me the responsibility to be able to help them. And along the way, the imposter syndrome tells me they're going to find out you're not as good as you say you are, and they're going to fire you.
That's interesting. Well, because I've definitely been there before, but do you think it's like, because you were saying, okay, as a student, we don't get imposter syndrome. As a teacher, we do. But do you think it's the label that you're like, wow, this label carries a lot of weight. Like it's a lot of responsibility. Like, do you think for example, if you didn't have that label as financial coach, right? Because for me, I hate it when they're like, I don't hate it. The hate is a strong word. It's just like, I'd rather not. When they're talking about history, and mind you, there's so much to history. I don't know dates. People ask me around, but this time I'm going to Google it. Like, I do not remember dates for the life of me. And they start talking about something random that I haven't even studied until like in high school. Like, I don't remember. And they're like, oh, the history teacher. And I'm just like, wait. Like I'm like, I feel like pressure, like to perform almost like, oh my gosh, I better remember the next question they say. And I'm just like, oh, I don't know. And so do you think it's just the label of, oh, if I didn't have that history teacher and they were talking about it, like it'd be like, oh, you don't have that pressure, so you can easily, say like, oh, I don't know.
Yeah, it's part of it is the label or the title, and it's for me, it's a switch. On the one side, you're a student and you're openly saying, I don't know it all, but I'm putting in the work to find out. On the other hand, as a teacher, you go, I know my stuff, I'll teach you.
But why can't we have that label as a teacher with the mindset and with the posture telling our students, like, I am still learning and I don't know it all.
You gotta, and why I'm on the opposite side of that is because you're telling me, go advertise that you're a financial coach. Go advertise that you can do photography. Go advertise that you can do videography. So you're asking me to advertise. And when you advertise, think about marketing. You don't market, hey, I kind of know, so I think I might be able to help you. You never market that way. How do you get people to buy into what you're selling? You go, I know my stuff. Trust me.
I guess it depends in what field for sure. Because, yeah, I think as a teacher, I tell my students, like, sometimes they ask me, I'm like, oh, that's a good question. Like, let's look it up. Or, oh, what do you think? And then have them look it up, right? And we still, throughout our professional career, we're encouraged to go to professional developments. Like, they'll pay sometimes for us to go to conference, like, learn on new pedagogy and, like, always be educated. So I think teaching in that sense is like, I am a teacher, but I'm not expected to know. I mean, I'm expected to be some knowledgeable. Obviously, I took tests. I had to do so many like lessons and whatever. There's so much that goes into it.
Yeah.
So it's not like, oh, she's just willing to learn. Let's make her a teacher. But there is a humility side of it. Is like, I'm a long life student.
Yeah, and I think it depends in the department that you're in. Like, as a financial coach, you don't go, hey, I don't really know everything, but if you can trust me with all your money and all your money secrets and all your debt and stuff, I think I might be able to help you.
And that's interesting because I think I've experienced for sure imposter syndrome. Like, obviously, I started off saying that. But as you're talking, I'm like, oh, I haven't experienced it that way. Usually my imposter syndrome comes in like I'm in a classroom setting, like where I'm the student maybe. And then I hear people's vocabulary and I'm like, whoa, they're saying fancy words. And then I'm just like, oh my goodness, like I'm not as smart. Like so I don't belong.
Your imposter syndrome is basically like, I don't deserve or I don't belong where I am right now. It's not really like, because mine's more performance based. Right?
Yeah.
And yours is more like, I have something that I feel like I don't deserve, or I have something that I feel like others will think that I don't deserve.
No, but I also kind of like doubt my mental abilities, because when it comes to like jobs, I'll hat myself up. On my resume, I'm managers of something I wasn't. That's probably bad to admit, but like I'd fluff it up, right? And so I'm going out, like I'm not a photographer, but like let's just say I had a little bit of photography. I'd be like,
she takes pictures with iPhones. I'm a photographer.
I'd be like, a wedding photographer. I could do it. I'll tell people I could do it, and I'd learn it, and I'd learn the heck out of it, and I'd go and I'd do as best as I can, right? Mm-hmm. I'm gonna hide myself and say, yep, I could do it. Yes, I could do it. Yes, I could do it. But for some reason, then when I'm in the room or something, but then that's probably what that's probably like, you don't belong there. That's probably not imposter syndrome because I don't have the abilities.
No, that wouldn't be imposter syndrome. That's just you being an imposter. Like, it's not a syndrome at that point. As an imposter syndrome, to actually clarify what my wife is saying, imposter syndrome is that you actually do have the qualifications to be where you are, but at the same time, you still feel inadequate, and you still feel like somebody's going to find out you are not as good as they think that you are, and they're going to fire you. They're going to toss you aside.
Okay, so in going back to my example of like, let's say the university setting, or even as a teacher, sometimes I think I'm a great teacher. I don't doubt my teaching abilities. Sometimes I doubt my knowledge. Like, I have not studied this for years, and I don't go home and pour over history books. Like, it's not I wouldn't call it like my straight up like expertise, right? Mm-hmm. So sometimes I'm like, oh, maybe I'm not meant to be this teacher. I'm not good enough to be a teacher, whatever, right? Like, I doubt myself. And university setting, I feel like that was the most I've had it. Because again, but I wonder if it's because I kind of see it as like, these people are smarter than me. I maybe think of it more like as a blessing, like kind of it was God's favor and nothing. But that's like, where do we see it as like, it's nothing I could have ever done, and maybe I don't belong, but God opened the door and I'm here. Like, where is that fine line? Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. Or could that be imposter syndrome?
Okay, you're bringing like the Bible into it, Christianity into it. I honestly thought you were going to push this more farther down, but you opened up the book already.
I opened up the book.
I was thinking about this today and thinking about imposter syndrome. And I feel like, especially for Christians, imposter syndrome is a space of an in-between of you don't really deserve to be there. Kind of like, okay, let's say, for example, me being in the field that I'm in professionally in safety. I don't have a degree in it. I'm a safety director and I don't have a degree in safety. I have experience in it and I have practice in it, but I just don't have a degree. And so I'm in a position right now that technically I should not have.
God's favor, correct.
That's God's favor, right?
Yeah.
And so when the imposter syndrome comes in and basically tells me like, you are going to fail. You are not going to be as good as they think. And your boss is going to fire you eventually. And he's going to find out that you're a fraud and he's going to actually hire somebody that has a degree and actually knows what he's doing. So that is the imposter syndrome. And I feel like the in-between is, let's say I was completely confident. I think the in-between is basically like, there is a room for imposter syndrome in the sense of, how do I explain this? I believe that it could be a negative thing and a positive thing. And it all depends on the perspective and your focus. I think how it can be a positive thing is, God, I am feeling this fear. I am feeling like I am not good enough, that I do not belong here, which is biblical because how many freaking times does God call up somebody that everybody else says they should not be there?
Yeah, they're not qualified.
They are not qualified. But that is the space where God works in,
Yeah.
where we then surrender and be like, all right, God, if this is where you have us, if this is where you've placed us, then you are going to do everything and I am going to surrender. And that's where there is no way that I could ever take glory
Yeah.
for what is happening right here, because I myself believe I don't belong here.
Yeah.
And that's how you could see it in a positive light or in a Christian walk where it's like, okay, there's imposter syndrome, but is it almost like part of a Christian, Christ followers' journey? Because if they had all the confidence where they would never get imposter syndrome, could you call that pride?
And I think that's where, as a Christian myself, like you kind of, I guess, struggle with that, right? Because how you said it's imposter syndrome because God takes a hero or a person that's like not qualified and makes it a hero, but the imposter, they're not the hero. It's God is the hero, right? But to people's eyes, it looks like they're the hero, but he's an imposter. It is God moving. It is the Holy Spirit. It is not that person. He's a vessel, right?
Well, at that point, I wouldn't call him an imposter.
No, but like, but
place.
you know what I'm like trying to get at? So like, that's where it's like an imposter syndrome. Like he wasn't qualified. He shouldn't have been there.
Yeah. By worldly standards, let's say, like he had no business being there. Like,
yeah.
Let's say, for example, you take the story of David. I mean, I love that story, obviously. Yeah. But they pick Saul as the first king of Israel, and they base it all off on looks or how he acts. He's a man of war, or whatever, and that goes horribly wrong. Samuel goes to find the true king that God actually wants, goes through all of David's 7 brothers, and he goes, this must be it, this must be it, this must be it, all going off by sight. Then gets to the smallest kid, and God's like, that's the one.
Yeah.
And again, David could have walked around with imposter syndrome, been like, you could have picked any of my brothers. They would have probably done a great job. They're big. They're men of war. They go fight. Like, I have no business. I'm just a shepherd boy. I play the freaking harp. Like, what business do I have being a king? All day long, he could be singing that song. But, and that's why maybe like imposter syndrome, like I don't want to be blasphemous, so I'm trying to find a good way to say this. But the best way I could say it is it's probably part of most of our lives.
But, can I interrupt? Mm-hmm. But there is a moment where David, using your example, goes up to defeat Goliath. Mm-hmm. Or he wants to, right? They're looking for someone like who's going to stand up. And David is like, oh, I will. And Saul is kind of like, what are you thinking? But he says, I protected my father's sheep. I had to fight off like bears, was it? And like lions or something. Like he had to fight them. So it's not that, like maybe he wasn't qualified to be a king, but that there was something he had that gave him that, but I am qualified. Like it might not be qualified to the world in society standards, but I am qualified. So for your example, going back to the safety director, you do not have the society worldly degree of like the stamp, I went to school and I did this. But you are qualified where you could say like God gave me the favor because to society standards I'm not, but I did the experience. I put in the work.
Yeah.
So
yeah,
where
exactly.
David can say like, I am not a king in society standards, but that I could fight and lead an army. Like I have been practicing. Because that's where like in the line where I'm like, oh, what's that good balance? Like that good, how you said in between. Because I even posted it today on my stories where there's a lot of verses about like a sluggard or laziness, against laziness, right? And it says, when will you arise from your sleep? That a little sleep, a little slumber, a little folding of the hands to rest, poverty will come upon you like a robber. And it basically like says like, we're not meant to like be lazy and work. So I think God wants us to be working in discipline. And so I think we should be people of self-discipline, of organization, and people of order, and achieve things with our life. Because usually those people, how it says like the early bird gets the worm, like they have success. But I think God, so that when God opens the doors of places we don't belong, we can say like, but this, like, it's like faith without action is dead, right? Like we have to do something on our own, like something. The saying God is like, are you being good stewards of what I've given you so that I can open up these opportunities, if that makes sense? So would you say that's kind of like the line?
Yeah, I'd say so.
Because that's what like I think, where I'm like there's certain opportunities in my life where I'm like, I would have never received, like even for Biola, like my university, high school, like there was moments in years in my life where I was like studying hardcore, and then years where I did really bad. And getting accepted, I felt like I don't belong here, but there was work that I did and things that I failed, but God opened the door, if that makes sense. But it's like preparation for it.
Yeah.
So on the other hand of that, like the other side of imposter syndrome, because there was this one girl, and maybe you've already answered it. I don't know if you've heard of this Olympian rugby player. She's like this woman. She just got like famous on TikTok. I don't know how to say her name. I'm gonna try. I haven't heard her name, but it's like Ilana Mahler or something like that. It's a complicated name. And she was in an interview, and a woman just assumed, she was like, what do you do about imposter syndrome? Like just assumed she had it. And she was just like, I don't get that. And the interviewer was kind of like, oh, but what do you do if she goes, no, I don't get that. Like I work hard. I practice hard. Like everything I've accomplished is because I've done it. So do you think that's a negative view in Christian life? Like, what do you think about someone who has that point of view?
Okay, so we've talked about imposter syndrome and of how it can bring in fear.
Yeah.
Right. I think in that regard, there is a way to beat back fear. Right. We've talked about the faith part where it's like, okay, it's God. I'm going to surrender to you. You're going to do what you're going to do. And it is what it is. But even through faith is dead without actions.
Yeah.
And so we go back to David when he took kingship, like he had to take actions. And as you see his story fold out, he embraces the identity of king, right? And so I think there's possibility that you get imposter syndrome when you step into a new role. And that's what I said at the beginning. You step into a new role, you haven't fulfilled that role yet. It's a new role. You've never done it before. You've maybe practiced it, you maybe studied it, but you've never stepped actually into that role. So when you step into that role, you might get imposter syndrome, being like, I don't know if I belong here. Why? Because there is no evidence.
Yeah.
There is no actions that you've taken. You haven't been there before. So let's say for this rugby player, like maybe the first time that she stepped on the field, Maybe she was 5 years old. I don't know how long she's been playing rugby, but let's say it was 5 years old. I'm guessing at 5 years old, she was a little nervous on her first day. Any little kid that starts a sport, whatever, on their first game, guaranteed those kids are nervous.
So is nerves equal to like imposter syndrome?
I think so. Because and I'm talking nerves and also a mentality of like, I don't know how to do this. There's no comfortability. I remember the first time that I played keys at a church. I was stiff as heck. Like just stiff. And I remember the worship leader was like, no, move around, like let loose, whatever. And I'm like, no, I'm focusing. I've never done this before. But as time goes on, as the actions start to build up, as the evidence starts to build up that you can do this thing, imposter syndrome tends to dissipate.
But wouldn't then that not be imposter syndrome? Because imposter syndrome is when you already have the success, you have the qualifications. So like a 5-year-old, that wouldn't be imposter syndrome. That would just be nerves because they've never done it before.
But going back to my safety thing, I did safety before.
Yeah.
Right? I had evidence. But I've never been given the title. When I got the title, I had the evidence and I had the confidence enough to do an interview and get the job.
Yeah.
But when I stepped into the role, I'm like, is this going to be too much for me? Am I not going to do a good job? How fast is it that they're going to notice that I'm not good at this? How fast is it that they're going to notice that I keep dropping the ball?
Yeah.
And so I think it correlates.
That makes sense. And so do you currently find yourself still in that stage of imposter syndrome? Or like how, if anyone does, like, do you have advice to like, okay, this is how I get out of it? Or is it a cycle that you kind of have to constantly keep yourself in check?
So there is a guy named Alex Hormozy, and if anybody has heard of him, has heard him speak, he's very bold and he's very blunt. And I like the way that he talks about imposter syndrome. He basically says, if you have imposter syndrome and you've embraced it, that probably just means that you're an imposter. And the reason why he says that is because he goes, if you feel like an imposter, is because you probably haven't done anything to earn the right to not have imposter syndrome. So he's very like a works-based person. Okay. So he says, do the work, get the results, then you have evidence to stand on. And I embrace that. Because like if you don't do the work, you'll never build the evidence. And this correlates with the episodes that we've done on identity. Yeah. Like we say, how do you build an identity? You got to do these practices. You got to do these things that back up that identity over and over and over. And you start building and building and building until boom, I hit it. Like, this is who I am. I think also where imposter syndrome comes in is comparison.
Yeah, for sure.
Because if you were to tell me, play the keys in a Pentecostal church of like 100 people, I'd be like, all day, let's go. You tell me to play the keys, which I've been told to play the keys at our current church, and I go, nah, bro, like they got some musical beasts up there. I have no business being up there. And our friend Nate goes, no, come on. Like, you can do it. Like, what are you talking about? And I'm over here, nope, there's no way. Because I personally feel like the moment I start playing, all these musical beasts are going to be like, what the heck is this dude doing? Like, get him out of here as fast as possible.
So, but why? It shouldn't, right? Like, and you probably would agree, like, it shouldn't. The size of the location or who is in the building.
And that's where comparison comes in. Because in a church of 100 people, my thought is there hasn't been musical beasts that come through here. And I hope I'm not offending anybody, but like, that's what I think.
That's your honest thought.
And so, whereas like in our church, I mean, you got some freaking beasts in there. And so I go like, I do the comparison and I'm like, well, in one pond, I'm a big fish. In another, I feel like a tiny minnow in an ocean. Like I have no business being there. I'm going to get eaten up, you know? And so it comes down to a comparison for me in that regard, where I'm like, I have evidence enough to be at this level, but not over here.
But you wouldn't know if you don't just try.
Exactly.
And that's where I'm like, let's just try. And maybe I'll get imposter syndrome when I try.
And I will throw myself under the bus right now. I have, as much as, you know, I like to present a champion spirit and I'm going to overcome everything. There are times where I have let fear just stop me. And that's one example. Yeah. The not advertising the financial coach is another example. The not advertising the photography and videography is another example, where I don't feel adequate. I compare myself to other people and I go, they should just hire those other people because I ain't got no business doing this.
Why? Okay, first of all, if you guys have heard him worship and play piano or even seen his photography stuff, like, say something in the comments. Be like, David, what are you doing? Like, go. Don't let fear stop you. Because, yeah, I mean, I feel like if I could take, how I said, like, sing a little, do photography, like, oh, I'd put myself out there. Like, who wants me? But with that, I think, like, why is your, what is it? Like, your mindset, why does it automatically go to comparison?
Why? Okay, so now we're getting into like the root of like my psychology.
Like, do you think about it? Like, do you go looking for it?
No. This is you're talking about these feelings. Do I go looking for these feelings?
Because I feel like when, like, let's say sometimes, because I'm a teacher, right, through and through, and sometimes I'm like, oh, I want to post this on Instagram, like maybe like a little like a message and stuff like that. And I'm like, I think like, oh, this is fire. I'm gonna post it. And that's like my initial thought. Like my initial thought, I'm like, this is fine, I'm going to post it. If I sit on that feeling for a while, eventually maybe I think I'll be like, no, I don't even, for me, I don't think like, oh, what other people, like compared to other teachers or other speakers, how would I sound? I usually have to worry about like, does this make me look prideful? I feel like that's where my mind goes. But it seems like you, like when you are excited about something, you don't go like, oh, does this make me look prideful? You go, wait a minute. There's other big people. Like you kind of put yourself lower. Where I put myself higher, like, does this make me look prideful? You put yourself lower of like, I'm nowhere near them. Like, who am I to advertise this? Would you say I'm correct?
Yeah, I guess so.
So you would think it's like as soon as you have that thought of like, oh, I want to do this, you automatically like, look, wait, who's around me that doing this? Like, I'm not better than these people.
Kind of like, let's say for example, the financial coach. I don't do that. I mean, I don't know any of the financial coaches.
And that's why I'm like, I don't understand. Because piano, okay, kind of get it.
Okay, listen.
It's kind of like therapy.
So this comes down to my childhood, like how I was conditioned throughout my whole life. Like mistake, you are this identity. Mistake, you are that identity. Like it was never good enough. And so I can understand why I have imposter syndrome or why I get it.
Okay.
Because I kind of always got told like, you are not good enough. And like every single mistake was punished. Every single mistake was magnified.
Okay.
And so, yeah, like I'm going to have a tendency to be like, do I really want to do this?
Yeah.
And am I going to feel these feelings that I got before? So that's where that comes from. In regards to the financial coach, I just, the imposter syndrome comes in when I think a family is going to give me the responsibility to help them. Can I actually help them? And it's crazy, the psychology of like, if I'm going to have a conversation with these people, if they were never to ask me like, hey, can you be my financial coach? There's no responsibility in that. But if they were to come to me, walk up to me, like let's say at church or whatever, and ask me every single Sunday, hey man, like I've been doing this and blah, blah, like, what do you think? I'd gladly, easily just like, hey, this is what you should do, blah, 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 blah. This is what I read in this article and blah, 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 and walk away and cool. Like,
and but you'd feel confident that they're being, I helped them.
Yes. But the moment that the label gets put of you now have the responsibility of my finances in your hand. I'm now paying you to help me get out of this debt. I'm now helping or paying you to help me get this dream house or whatever. Like, that's where I'm like,
But for me, it sounds now, when you framed it that way, that you don't feel worthy.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, that's something that I found out in therapy as well. Like, there's a good amount of my life where I felt I do not feel worthy.
Yeah. Because that you're capable,
Yeah.
It's just, I don't feel worthy of getting paid. I don't feel worthy of, you don't believe that you are good enough for that, like for payment.
Yeah.
Or for the label.
Or the payment or the label. Yeah. Like, I don't feel worthy to get paid. I don't feel worthy to have that title.
Mm-hmm. But if there's no pressure, if there's no payment, if there's nothing, you're like, oh, I can
do this all day long. Yeah.
That's weird. I'm over here like, I don't know if I could tutor you well, but give me that money. Give me that.
I don't know if I'm going to screw you up, but give me that money.
I like tutored and no, this is bad. I shouldn't be putting myself out there. I already had people go like, well, I like tutored this little kid of like how to speak Spanish, and when I feel like I'm not a good Spanish speaker, and I'm just like, hey, it's my time. My time is valuable. But that's interesting because you said it about your career.
Mm-hmm.
And so now I'm wondering, like, what did you do in your career? Was it just you? Because you do that day in and day out. Mm-hmm. You are a safety director. You wake up, you're a safety director. You leave that office, you're a safety director. Like, you do it. So was it just repetition that got you out of feeling imposter syndrome when it comes to being safety director?
I think it is. It's a combination of repetition. It's a combination of comfortability. I think
in that role.
Yeah. A comfortability comes from, I've done this many times, and now it's like just a rhythm of mine, you know? But at the beginning, like when I got that role, I had a decision between I step into this role or I completely disappoint my wife. Because if you guys don't know, I was working at this job as a maintenance technician, and I wasn't getting paid that well, but I wasn't getting paid that bad either. And I was very comfortable. And my wife goes, nah, buddy, it's time for you to leave. And I don't know if you said, ask for more money or get the heck out of there and go find another job.
I did.
And that was when there was like a huge scandal at work with, a raise and blah, blah, blah. And so I was like, I'm really comfortable here though. I had friends. I had liberty to do whatever I want whenever I wanted. I had a corner cubicle where nobody bothered me. Like it was a great gig. But you were like, no, I'm not okay with this. You get out there, you go be uncomfortable and get yourself a better paying job. And I had a choice whether
you listened to me.
I listened to you, and like I listen to you, and I work hard for my family, or I go step into an unknown for my family, or I give into this fear. And so I applied for that job, got a call, go for the interview. That same evening, get the call, hey, job's yours, how much money do you want? Kind of went back and forth, got a number that we were happy with. And I was like, okay, I'm going to be a safety director or whatever. And from that moment, it was kind of battling against fear every single day. Just like I'm going in, and I did have these thoughts of like, you're going to fire me. In a week, they're going to fire me. And the week went by, I'm like, next week they're going to fire me.
Wow.
And yeah, when you have imposter syndrome, I always go back to, you're always at a crossroads. You always have a choice. You give in to the fear or you fight the fear. And obviously I chose to fight the fear, and I'm 3 years in and still the safety director, haven't been fired yet.
And you won't, because if God opens the door, he will see you through it.
Yeah, and I have had a lot of favor in that job.
Yeah.
Favor that I mean, I tell you about it all the time, and I'm like, I have no business getting all this stuff. I have no business. I don't deserve any of this.
Yeah.
And yeah, it just blessings upon blessings.
Yeah. And wives, if you're hearing this, because I feel like men are supposed to be the provider and the leader, but a lot of men get comfortable, or maybe it's fear, right? Or imposter syndrome, whatever. But don't be telling, at least I think, this is my personal opinion, like, don't be telling your man that if you're not willing to do it. That's what I think.
Yeah.
Because I could have stood up on that and been like, David, you see me. Like, I always am like, what's next thing? What's the biggest thing? So I feel like I wouldn't have had any weight to my demand, if that makes sense, if I didn't practice that.
I mean, we're going a little bit off topic here, but I will dip into it a little bit. I think the role that you're taking right now is maybe a role of a man that goes, I need to lead before I ask my follower to follow me. Whereas I see it more as a woman sees more in her man and she's calling it forth. And that's, I mean, we've talked about that as well.
Yeah.
You know, a man marries a woman, that's going to be his help. A woman marries a man, that's going to be her leader. And so I think what you did there was, I see something better in you. I know you could do way better than this.
Yeah.
Go. And I'm like, no, but I'm comfortable. Nah, you could do better. Go. And I went, all right, God, this is the help that you gave me. And sure enough, I got a better job.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad you fought fear. And I think you're right. I'm glad you fought fear. And what advice? Because I know for me, when I feel imposter syndrome, I have to like tell myself, okay, like, what are the wins? Like, what did God already do in my life? It's like that song, like, God, you'll do it again, right? Like, he will do it again. But you have to remember, I think that's what God always told the Israelites, like, I was the God that took you out of Egypt. I was the God that parted the Red Sea. I was the God that provided manna. Because when we are so forgetful. So when we forget, it's like, okay, this has been done. This has been done. So you can stand on solid ground and not feel like an imposter, like you don't belong here. It's like, God did this. Or even like your actions, right? Like, I worked hard for this. That's why God is blessing me. He sees that I'm a good steward because I did this. So he's opening the door. It's like, recount those.
And if we're talking about that, then it's very important that you be God-led then. Because safety director, 100%, I cannot take any credit for that. I give all the glory to God. There is no way, like if I go apply for a safety director spot anywhere else with no degree, they're going to be like, buddy, why are you even applying? Like, get out of here, right? 100% God. Where in my life I could be like, oh, maybe it is valid or whatever, is like the photography, the maybe even the financial coach, but like these things that I myself worked for. I chose these things, right? I had always wanted to have a fancy camera. I had always thought I could be a good photographer. I tried it. And
you're good.
You say that I'm good, but I honestly like, I do compare myself to other people that started at the same time as me with the same equipment as me and just.
So you didn't
night and
continue.
Night and day. And so, and then I also think, okay, well, did God lead me this way? Did God lead me towards photography? Not really. I did it myself. We saved up the money. I asked you, can I buy this stuff? And you're like, yeah, sure, go ahead. And I bought it. And so that's where I see like one thing is actually God-led, where you're saying like, yeah, like look at the evidence of everything that God has done in the moments where he's called you to go to these places.
Yeah.
100,000%. You know, like, yeah, I 100% like that's a good way. Another thing that you can also journal and be like, okay, like I'm nervous about this. I feel imposter syndrome, but here's all these other times that he's also done it. Okay. The imposter syndrome starts coming down because I see that he's done it other times as well. But when we're talking about like a photography, a hobby, whatever, that I just like, I kind of want to do it. Let's see how it goes. and I have a wife that goes, no, go, like go make me some more money. I'm like, here's the thing with photography. Let's say photography. It's imposter syndrome, but it's also like, I take pride in my work most of the time. And when it comes to photography, I'm like, if anybody is paying any sort of money, they deserve the best. They deserve a good quality picture. And I mean,
I have stuff to say.
Photography is creativity, so it is subjective.
Correct.
My perspective of that subject, the subjectiveness, is I'm not good and I wouldn't pay X amount for this stuff. What?
Okay. Because I feel like, how do I say this? Well, I'm going to have to make myself look bad. There's no other way. For example, the TikTok thing, right? In the beginning, I had no idea if this was, I just want this for myself because I wanted it for so long, or if this was God, right? And I do think there's some things that like are calling, like 100% I know without a doubt that I'm meant to be a teacher, right? That's not doubted or negotiated or whatever. The TikTok thing, I'm like, right? Like, this is what I wanted. And I do think God for sure has to stamp anything. Like, I will allow this or I won't, like, regardless, right? Mm-hmm. And so I feel like in your case, you had this desire for photography, but maybe, I don't know, this is just my observation, maybe like you didn't give it to God. For example, with my TikTok, I was like, God, I don't know. I wanted to do social media, not TikTok, social media for so long. I tried, failed, whatever, right? We've already talked about my TikTok journey. And then I decided, you know what? I'm going to kind of put it in God's hands. And God, I'm giving you like 3 months. I'm giving TikTok 3 months, you 3 months, like give me a sign. And we saw signs. And even till this day, if I compare myself, like everyone knows, like what are you doing on there? Like I am shocked that my videos get the views they do. Like I can bring money for that. And then I sit and think like these brands are willing to pay me for a 45-second video. Like how much? Like I'm like, I would never pay for that. I'm like, my quality, like I'm not even, I can't, if I would be paying for that, or if I think any brand would be paying for that, I'm like, how you said, they deserve like the best. But then I think to myself and I'm like, I can't give the best right now. Like I don't have the equipment. I don't have the time. So then I think like God is opening the doors. Like he knows what time I do have. He knows like what I can give in this moment in time. And so I feel like he graces that, right? With your photography, like people that were willing, like people reached out to you because you don't advertise. People like seek you like for weddings, for their family stuff. Like they're willing to do that. So I wonder like if you did give it to God and you're like, okay, God, if this is like, then do I better my craft? Because I feel like you never gave it that time of that season of like waiting because people were willing to pay for that.
And I think that then comes up to me having a moment of self-reflection is like, do I really want to do this? And the way that I see it is, okay, I've always wanted to do this. I could never afford the camera because cameras are freaking expensive.
Yeah.
I could never afford the equipment. I'm in a place that I can. We bought the stuff and I'm like, let me try it. Mm-hmm. Let me see if I have what it takes. Yeah. Right? I don't naturally have what it takes. I'm going to just say that plain and simple. I don't feel like I have what it takes. And so when I make the decision, I don't feel like I have what it takes, then I'm at a crossroads. Do I continue working at it? Mm-hmm. In which 100%, like you see, that is the difference between talent and hard work. So I get to that crossroads. Do I go the hard work way where I'm not talented in it, but if I do all the research, if I do all the practice, I will get good. Mm-hmm. It might take me years, but I will get good if I don't stop. Okay. Or I go, I don't have the talent. Now, do I really want to do all this hard work? Is this where I see myself in the next 10 to 20 years? No. Okay. Then now it just becomes kind of like not even a side hobby. Like it's just something in the back burner.
Okay.
And I think that's where I came to the conclusion, like, yeah, I'm not going to really do this anymore. Like, I'm not going to put in all this work. I have my time could be better spent in other places. Whereas, like, let's say helping people. Obviously, I'm passionate about that. I like helping people, in life or whatever.
Yeah.
Like, if I felt like I didn't have the talent, that's something I'd be like, okay, I got the crossroads. I don't have the talent. Like, but can I do all the research? Can I read all the books? Can I prepare myself, do the hard work to do this? I'd be like, yeah, I will.
And last question for you.
Mm-hmm.
I just thought about it as you were talking. Do you get imposter syndrome with the podcast?
No. I don't feel like I do.
Interesting.
Yeah. And I think...
Because you watch a lot of podcast people.
Yeah. And okay, so here's the thing. In regards to this podcast, I don't really compare our podcast to anybody else. I don't feel like I have a responsibility to help anybody. Like it's a choice whether they watch it or not, right? Okay. And so that responsibility is alleviated. I don't have that. And to me, what it is I'm having a conversation with you. We're hopefully talking about good topics that if whoever hears could have their own conversations. Now, if you were to tell me, hey, start advertising that you're mentoring for this price and blah, 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 I'd be like, ooh.
Or if we get a brand saying, oh, put our water there and we'll pay whatever, then would you get imposter syndrome? Like, who are we to put?
No, I'd be like, put that water there.
That's interesting.
Yeah. So I don't have imposter syndrome with this. And I also know, and it's also because I accept the fact that there is growth happening in this. Like where we started from episode 1 to where we are now, I'm assuming that we've done a better job, you know?
Yeah.
Whether it's visually, communication wise, production wise, whatever. It's a slow curve up, right? And I'm not really comparing myself to anybody because the moment that you, in this regard, for me, the moment I compare myself to anybody else, then I'm trying to be those people. And here I feel like we're just trying to be genuine, I guess.
Interesting. So, any advice that you'd give of like if you're feeling imposter syndrome?
Well, first you need to ask yourself kind of what I did with photography. Like, if I have imposter syndrome in XYZ, it could be you teaching, it could be your job, it could be ministry. Ask yourself, do I want to do the work? Because if you want to do the work, then you will have to contend with fear probably on a daily basis. You'll have that voice telling you, you ain't got no business being here.
Yeah.
They're going to find out that you're a fraud. They're going to find out that your life is a sham. They're going to fire you. You're going to have to contend with that always. Well, for a while at least. And you just got to put in the work. You put in the work and you start stacking up the evidence. And as you stack up the evidence, I believe that we should always have that humility. And I think that's what part of what imposter syndrome does as well. It keeps us humble. It keeps us like, hey, like, no, somebody else could come probably do this job better than me, you know? But as you start stacking up the evidence, also make sure that you have God in your whole mentality in your heart, where you're saying like all this evidence, God, that's thanks to you. Like I could not be doing this on my own.
Yeah.
It's what I do with safety directing. Like God, I have no business being here. All these trainings that I do, these job site visits that I do, these analysis that I do, whatever, like I could not do without you. There's evidence that, you know, like I'm doing this job, but it's all thanks to you.
Yeah.
So overcoming fear, build the evidence, and surrender to God. I think that's
good. I'd add, like keep track of what God has done in your life. Build your confidence in God. And we said this with identity. It's how you said it's very similar.
Okay. You just said something that somewhat triggers me. Because people tend to, I'm sorry, but I have to say this because you said, build your confidence in God, your identity in Christ. Like, it sounds beautiful when people say it like, oh, don't build your confidence in this, build your confidence in God. Don't build your identity in this, build your identity in Christ. What does that mean?
For me, because I would always tell you for the longest, like, I get nervous, like teaching. And then you'd be like, you still hate it when you're like, why? You've done this time and time again, and you're good at it. You know you're good at it. Everyone knows you're good at it. Like, why, right? So I had to like tell myself, am I a teacher? Yes. Has God come? Even the times where I prepared, but I didn't feel prepared, or I was nervous or something, like whatever. Like, God is the one to put me through, which is like, I can only go so far in my preparation and my studies. Like, I can only hold so much in here. And then when I don't have the words, God will give it to me. When I didn't read something, God will give me a revelation and like speak to me. Like, and then I remind myself, it's like, I told you this example, like my earthly parents, where I'm like, look who they were, right? This is kind of where I got it from. But I'd be like, who is like my God? Like, what did he do? And reading the Bible reminded, like, I say that God that they have, like, that's the same God that I have. The God that they worshiped above them, like, that's the same God that I have. So if he did it for them, it's like that song. He's going to do it for me. And I show all of my answered prayers. I go back to my answered prayers and I say, like, I wanted this. I didn't think it would happen in my own strength. And he did it. This is what he did. This is what he did. And it's awesome writing it down or remembering your prayers, because you go back and you're like, I have confidence that he answered that. So I know my confidence is in him, if that makes sense. So for me, it goes back to like reading your Bible, knowing who God is, knowing what he did, knowing him, because it's the same God that we read in the Bible, and having a prayer life, because you don't see your prayers answering immediately, but it's through those times where he doesn't answer. It's like that. Those struggles produce endurance. Then when you do see it answered, you're like, okay, my faith is growing. My confidence grew during that time. My waiting now grew. So that's what I mean by confidence in God. If that makes sense. So I'd say that. I'd say grow your confidence in God, which has to be done through the word and prayer. And remembering, because so many times where if in the Israelites, again, I'm like submerged in Old Testament right now because I'm teaching it, or like whatever. They easily would forget. And I always said, teach the next generation, teach them, because if we forget, we don't have confidence and trust in God. It's so easy for us to forget. So whether write it down, record it, whatever you have to do so that you don't forget what God has done in your life. And then I think reframe our negative thoughts, which I've been trying to do. Like every time I complain, every time I self-doubt myself, I always try to catch myself and then change it. No, Grace, you are smart. No, Grace, like you could do this. Or same thing. No, God has done this. It's not about you. It's about like take in real time, try to change that negative thought that you just thought and try to turn it into positive until that becomes a habit. And you'd have less fear, less doubt. That's the tips I have. If there's anything else you want to add.
No, I think that's pretty good.
All right. And I think, again, you've heard it from us. It's completely normal to have this. I think people of all walks of life, with all achievement levels, have felt this. So there's nothing like wrong with you. I do think it's how you said, when we're faced with it, what route we're going to go that's going to determine where we end up. Because it's so easy to start spiraling and be paralyzed by fear and say, I'm not even going to step there, and not do it for yourself, for your future generations, not stepping into your calling. And we've talked about that. Like God has a calling for you, but you have to do something to you have to step in. And so let's start reframing our mind. Let's start taking our feelings into our hands, because when our feelings can start controlling us, that is dangerous. And so I do like that bit that you said of how it is, as Christians, it's this place where it brings us humble, knowing that we can't do it on our own. And so I would love to hear you guys' thoughts about, where do you find yourself with that? Do you think it's more bad than good, or more good than bad? Because we do have a different perspective as a Christian, knowing that it's not on us, it's on God. And thank you guys always for listening in. Please, I'd love to know your guys' thoughts and comments. We love interacting with you guys. And just thank you for all your support. David especially keeps all the data of all our growth, our likes, our everything. And so it's so amazing knowing that there's real people behind those numbers. You guys make this happen, and you guys keep us forward, even if it's just one person watching. And so thank you. And until next week, bye.
Bye.